That's life in the Big Ten Western Division. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Is anyone surprised with this final score? Maybe with a winner. Yes, Iowa looked down the stretch now that they won at Camp Randall Stadium against Wisconsin, who looked like they were probably the best team in the division. Then Iowa, special teams and defense, of course, taking charge against the Badgers, looked like they had the path to a Big Ten championship game appearance. Not that I'm surprised with the final score or surprised necessarily with the win, but Iowa did look like they were going to be the better team in each game going down the stretch against their final five opponents. But Minnesota, P.J. Fleck, formerly 0-7 against Iowa, 0-6 as Minnesota head coach. The Gophers had not won in Iowa City since 1999 and continue to get turned away in big games. And this looked like P.J. Fleck's worst team in 7 years. They lost to Northwestern, blew a 21-point lead, just completely ambushed by Michigan. Lost to other teams, North Carolina, some really good teams. Yeah, Michigan and North Carolina, but Minnesota, did they play a good game this year, truly? At least not against a decent opponent, but we've got Minnesota going to Iowa, winning 12-10. The first half, we've got to mention Tory Taylor, of course, and not just Tory Taylor, special teams player of the week in the Big Ten back-to-back weeks. But also the combination of Taylor and Cooper DeJean, the gunner, not just one of the best defensive backs in the country, not just one of the best punt returners in the country, and more on that, of course, in just a second. But as a gunner, just his natural athleticism and ability to track the ball in the air makes him not just a fast guy that can get down there like you see on many college football teams that lose track of the ball, don't make a good decision inside the 5 or 10 yard line, but he routinely gets down there. And one play in particular just, makes an over-the-shoulder catch on the bounce and walks the ball out of bounds at the half-yard line. Just amazing stuff out of him. Deacon Hill, of course, this is going to be his team for the rest of the season and has been his team for the past couple weeks. Actually throwing to the wide receivers. I don't know if that was super intentional or just was able to spot wide open or open wide receivers in the first half. 7 of 13, 96 yards for Deacon Hill. Hit Vines 3 times. Ragiani 3 times in the first half for reception. So a little life out of the Iowa passing game. A little life because if you do the math, they were on pace to throw for about 200 yards in the first half. Ethan Kalkimanis was not on pace to throw for 10 yards after the first half. 8 yards passing, 3 of 8. Iowa could not run the ball. During this dominance over Minnesota, again, the games have largely been close. Iowa hardly ever runs the ball against Minnesota anyway. 19 carries for 19 yards in the first half. Minnesota, though, had 5 3-and-outs. It was the Iowa defense and special teams in charge. 10-3 halftime score. Jay Higgins, want to note him. He had 8 tackles in the first half. I didn't see his final stats. Should have checked on those. He's averaging 12 tackles per game. But let's get back to the second half and the flow of the game. There was a 3rd and 2 with Minnesota driving the football. For one of the first times of the game. They really didn't do anything at all offensively in the first half, but came out first drive of the second half. Aaron Graves had a pass that he batted up in the air. Quinn Schulte had a shot at an interception, would have been huge, but Minnesota completed the drive with a field goal to make it 10-6. Then we had Tyler Nubin with a strip sack. So Iowa with its heels against the goal line, trying to dig itself out. And one of the big keys to Iowa offensively is, of course, and the victory in particular at Wisconsin, is not necessarily moving the ball for first downs, yardage, and points. Can't be points. Is protecting the football, but Deacon Hill could not do that on this day. He had his second fumble. And Tyler Nubin, one of the best safeties in America, strip sack right there, sets up Minnesota, but the Iowa defense holds at the 11-yard line. Gophers kicked the field goal to make it 10-9. Later got a field goal early fourth quarter to make it 12-10, so they take the lead there. One particular sequence was key in which Iowa was driving, and Seth Anderson dropped a pass that would have converted a first down, but also Mason Richmond was called for holding on the same play, so the Hawkeyes had to punt there. Let's take you to 4.5 minutes left in the game. Iowa at its own 13. At this point in the second half, the Hawkeyes had run 14 plays for a negative 8 yards. That is not a typo. 14 plays run in the second half for negative 8 yards. But they started to pitch and catch down the field. Adam Ostrenga with a phenomenal catch if he caught the ball. I thought he trapped it. I thought it was not fairly obvious. Definitely a judgment call, and called on the field that he caught the football. Huge catch for Iowa, but they eventually stall after converting a few first downs, and then they come up with a decision to punt the ball, which basically turned out to be the right decision from a timing standpoint. They once again, Kirk Ferentz and company, bet on the defense, and it worked out because 1:59 left on the clock, 4th and 7, good field position. Iowa punts. They punt Minnesota back to the 12-yard line. P.J. Fleck threw it on second down, not forcing Iowa to call a timeout, not using the clock, trying to... I can't fault the conventional football play is you run 3 times, you kick, but Iowa, number 1, only needed a field goal. Number 2, Iowa has Drew Stevens, a reliable long-distance field goal kicker. Number 3, you're on the road. And then lastly, hey, if you convert a first down, your chances of winning the game increase exponentially. So on 2nd and 9, they go for the first down. They call a play that doesn't work, and the pass falls incomplete. But on 3rd and 9, Minnesota goes back to being conservative, and then they punt. And that set up the play of the game. The unfortunate play of the game. Not because I'm rooting for Iowa, but unfortunate because you want to see the play on the field speak for itself and the players determine the game. Not that the officials did anything wrong. Cooper DeJean catches the punt on a hop down near the sideline. I don't know how the Minnesota punt return coverage, how the coverage did not pin him in and knock him out of bounds, but Cooper DeJean did what Cooper DeJean does. Cooper DeJean things in that situation. We saw it against Michigan State. We see it here. He fields the punt flawlessly. He doesn't panic, hurry. He calmly allows and picks and chooses and makes Minnesota defenders miss, and then suddenly, boom, he's streaking up the sideline, and then he's cutting across the field, and at that point, no Minnesota player has the agility or the tackling skills to haul down Cooper DeJean, and he runs into the end zone, and it looks like a carbon copy of Michigan State and also just a classic Iowa victory. Punt return touchdown. Cooper DeJean, one of the best players in the country, an All-American, capping off the win. But we had a flag on the field, and it did not appear, basically, after that initial surge of would-be tacklers, that there was any reason why any Iowa player would need to hold or clip or do anything illegal in the punt return. However, Cooper DeJean basically was giving the getaway signal. So with one hand, he was motioning to get away from the football since it had hit the turf. And with the other hand, I don't know what he was doing. It looked like a fair catch signal, but it was below the shoulder, though. So it should have been allowed. But you can look at the rule book. I don't remember ever coming across this with all the football that I watched. The getaway signal making the play dead from the time it was touched. The ball was touched. At that point, the play is dead because Cooper DeJean conceded with the hand signal that he was not going to return the punt. So unfortunately, the players on the field did not determine it. Hey, if it's in the rule book, call it what you will. The officials did not make a mistake. They have to make the call and make the judgment call. So that touchdown was negated. Iowa does get the football in prime field position to set up a late game field goal, but Danny Strigau had a sack on Deacon Hill. In the very next play, he airmailed one that Justin Wally picked off for the interception, and Minnesota defeats Iowa 12-10. Rush defense for Minnesota, wow, held Iowa to 28 carries, 11 yards. Even if you take away the sack yardage or at least the Deacon Hill yardage and look at the running backs, 20 rushing attempts for Iowa, 33 yards. Leshawn Williams, 11 carries for 13 yards for Iowa, and Caleb Johnson had 6 for 18. That's what he mustered. The long run for Iowa, 5 yards. 5 yards. Minnesota outgained Iowa by 112 yards. Ethan Kalkimanis did not have a stellar day, but he went 10 for 25. And, of course, Deacon Hill in going, I believe, 11 for 28, 10 for 28, 7 for 13 in the first half. So a 3 for 15 second half was partially the doom of Iowa here. Let's check out the Big Ten Western Division standings, because this suddenly goes from Iowa controlling its own destiny and other teams that were about to play Iowa to a free-for-all in which Wisconsin now controls its own destiny by coming back to defeat Wisconsin. The Badgers were down 21-7. They come back to win 25-21. So the Badgers now 3-1 in the conference. Now you've got a logjam at 3-2, 3-2, and Minnesota at 2-2. And of course, they had to face Michigan, as did Nebraska. And Minnesota's got the tiebreaker on Nebraska and Iowa. So if the Gophers can go for the next 4 weeks and win those games in the Big Ten, get themselves to, and who knows, the way these teams are playing in the Big Ten West, you could probably lose another game and still be in good shape. That Minnesota, keep in mind, has Wisconsin on the final weekend of the season. As always, Minnesota-Wisconsin could now be the game of the year in the Big Ten Western Division. Fascinating stuff out of the Big Ten West. And again, I feel bad that Cooper DeJean and Iowa made a play, but it was called back. But the officials made the proper call according to the rule book. PJ Fleck finally defeats Iowa in strange fashion, but not a strange score if you're a fan of the Big Ten West. 12-10 Minnesota. Your thoughts about the Hawkeyes down below. Of course, it was just another standard Hawkeye performance minus the penalty. They would have won at home, most likely, but Minnesota takes control of its own destiny. Right now, they're the team that controls its own destiny, as does Wisconsin in the Big Ten West. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Join us each and every Saturday night after the primetime games. Give me a call. Let's talk college football right here at the voice of college football.